The United States has a fairly unique way of electing its chief executive. Instead of the people voting directly on who they prefer as President of the United States, the Founding Fathers set up a system where each state chooses those who will then go on to vote for who should be president. The ones chosen by the states to actually vote for president are called electors, and this system of choosing the president has come to be known as the Electoral College. The Electoral College has garnered a lot of controversy over the years, even stretching back to the earliest elections of our country's history, and actually led to the 12th Amendment, which changed the way the electoral system works. You see, when the Constitution was ratified and George Washington was chosen by electors to be the first president of the United States, there were no political parties. Political parties actually formed during Washington's administration between members of his cabinet. Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State, and Alexander Hamilton, who was Washington's Secretary of the Treasury, often clashed with each other, and each went on to start their own political party. Jefferson started the Democratic-Republican Party, and Hamilton started the Federalist Party. Once Washington retired, those two parties faced off in the election of 1796. John Adams, who was vice president under Washington, ran as a Federalist against Thomas Jefferson, his arch rival. John Adams edged out Jefferson, who came in a close second, and Adams became the second president of the United States. Seems normal enough, except there was one big problem. You see, in its original form, the Electoral College operated on a first-place, second-place basis. There was no separate vote for president and vice president. Instead, each elector cast 2 votes for president, and the vice president spot simply went to whomever came in second. The advent of political parties complicated matters, a fact that was highlighted during the 1796 election. If second place becomes vice president, then that meant John Adams' vice president was none other than the guy he had been running against, his nemesis, Thomas Jefferson. How would you like to have your vice president, whose primary function is to take over when you die, be the guy you hate? Well, 4 years later, Adams and Jefferson had a rematch. That meant the president and vice president facing off against each other. A pretty bizarre scenario by today's standards. But since nobody wanted a repeat of the last 4 years where the president and vice president were rivals, Adams and Jefferson each picked a running mate. That is, the person they wanted to have as their vice president. And the electors would cast both votes, remember they have 2 votes for president, for one ticket or the other. Either for the Federalist ticket, which would be Adams and his running mate, or for the Democratic-Republican ticket of Jefferson and his. This time, Jefferson's team won. But now there was another problem. Because the Democratic-Republican electors all cast their 2 votes for both Jefferson and his running mate, a man named Aaron Burr, they ended up getting the same number of votes. That's a tie. So what happens when there is a tie for president? The Constitution says that the House of Representatives decides. Well, in 1800, the House was full of Federalists who were pretty upset they just lost to Jefferson's team, the architect of their rival party. So when they voted, a number of them tried to support Aaron Burr over Jefferson. Round after round of voting ensued with no winner. In fact, the voting went 35 rounds over several days. Finally, Alexander Hamilton appealed to his fellow Federalists, a political party he started, saying while he shared their dislike of Jefferson, Aaron Burr would be worse. So on the 36th ballot, they voted for Jefferson, who became the 3rd president of the United States. By the way, as a side note, Aaron Burr would later challenge Hamilton to a duel and kill him. After the elections of 1796 and 1800, the founders realized there was a problem with the Electoral College. The arrival of political parties had thrown a wrench into the system. So they proposed the 12th Amendment, which essentially created the party ticket system. No longer would electors place 2 votes for president, with the second place finisher becoming vice president. Instead, the candidates for president and vice president would be clearly established, and electors would now cast only 1 vote for president and a separate vote for vice president. That's why to this day, the president and vice president run as a team.